to Unquiet You. Today we're going to talk about what happens when someone you love avoids you because they have a feeling of feeling guilty. And this actually stems from a post I had made a couple weeks ago about if you feel guilty about something that you've done or not done for someone else, and to tell the difference between emotional maturity is how you whether avoid it or you address it and apologize and move forward. And I had multiple people reach out to me through DMs, and one girl, she was a younger girl in her 20s. I actually knew her because she went to school with some of my older kids, but she's married, and we ended up getting on a call because she was really upset about this because she noticed a pattern in her spouse that this was happening, and she didn't understand it, and she didn't know what to do, but she didn't want to admit that it was a pattern, but it had been a pattern. And so anyway, we got to talking about it, and the other questions were very similar that came to me through DM. So I thought I would briefly just do a little rundown on it because I've also experienced this in different relationships of my life. And I think sometimes it's hard to see a pattern, and it's also hard to understand that that person's pattern really has nothing to do with you. Because we think, oh, if we can just, maybe we need to say things differently, or if we do things differently, they'll respond differently. I just think that the bulk of people are never taught how to be emotionally mature. And so as we get older, we get into habits, we get into cycles, we get into, this is just how we do things. And so when we feel guilty, we avoid, right? There's a lot of people that do that. And their way of avoiding is you'll hear people say they'll get really upset with me or feel guilty about something, and then they buy me a diamond bracelet or they send me flowers or those sort of things. And it's easy to laugh about because I think a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, every time, he feels guilty about going golfing with the guys, he'll come home and buy me a gift. Or every time he does this, he'll buy me this. Or I've noticed that when my boss, feels guilty about a decision they made, they don't come out of their office for 3 days, or they'll give me a raise, or they'll tell me to take the day off to make up for it, something like that. And I think that it can be very confusing. And I think that sometimes it's very much it has to be a decision that we make of, do we accept this or do we not? And I think the biggest key here is that we're not always going to know why people do this. I think our brains want to say it's something we're doing. We're either not talking about this enough, or we're not describing who we are enough or what we want enough. But I also think that it's because that's just how they've been trained. More than likely, someone has done that to them in their life, and that's what they've learned. And I also think that they just don't want to do the uncomfortable conversations. And a lot of people don't like to admit when they're wrong. I've always said one of the biggest gifts you can ever teach your children is to teach them that it's okay to be wrong and to admit when they're wrong. And saying the words, I am sorry, will always be one of the biggest tools you'll have in your toolbox for just living the life that you truly desire. I know I've talked about this before, but there was someone in my life who had made a comment one day about not apologizing because they were never sorry for anything. They had never done anything they needed to apologize for. And I remember thinking that what a sad life that person lives, that they actually believe that saying I'm sorry and admitting that they've maybe done things to make people feel uncomfortable or things they wish they hadn't have done, that they never thought they could be that person because they looked at it as a weakness. Whereas I look at it as a strength. I love telling my kids if I do something, or if I forget something, or I make a decision. It's just so many things, but I will be the first to say, I'm sorry. I'm a human being and I do not do everything perfect, but I will be the first person to admit to you, I'm sorry. And that is something I've had to learn. But I think that's one of the biggest differences between emotional maturity and emotionally immature is a lot of people don't want to learn those skills. So I think we cannot change people. And I think that understanding that no matter how much we love someone, we cannot change them. We're not going to change their patterns. We're not going to change the way they think. We're not going to change whether they admit they're wrong. We're not going to change any of that. The only thing we can do is change us. And this is where hardcore boundaries come into play. This is where addressing things as they come up comes into play. And I think what can happen is when we are able to be vulnerable and be authentic and say how these things make us feel or patterns that we see, we now have opened the door for them to have conversations that maybe they don't even understand they're doing. I do think some people get in such patterns that they don't realize that they're doing it. It just has become the norm for them. And the girl that I was talking to, it was gut-wrenching to me because she had known this person since they were in high school and they had dated, got married young. And this pattern has shown up from the very beginning in high school. And, it's different when you're in high school because the maturity levels are different. But when you're married and it kept happening over and over. And it wasn't anything major, like he wasn't having an affair or anything like that. But she was just dwindling down every time it happened. She was like, I'm not good enough. There's something I'm not doing. And what I explained to her was it's nothing that she's doing or not doing other than she's not standing firm in what she believes and what she desires and what she needs from that person. Meaning it's okay to say, we have to have a hard conversation. This is a pattern I see. This doesn't work for me. It no longer is going to work. That if you feel this way, I think that you avoiding me or you being super busy for a couple of days, and then expecting things to forget about it and move on, it just doesn't work for me anymore. And that's where you being an emotionally mature person will override their immaturity in the sense that you'll now get what you need. And if they don't want to do something or they don't see themselves as having an issue or wanting to change that or addressing it, then now you know that to be their story and you get to make the decision what you do with it. You get to make the decision if this is going to work for you, if it's not going to work for you. But I think the key here is understanding it's not about fixing them. It's actually about becoming very aligned with your boundaries, what you desire, what you feel like you deserve, and what you're willing to take from other people. So I think that when this is an adult relationship of any sort, whether it's a work or a friendship or relation or, a love relationship, any relationship, we want to so many times we want to say it's me. There's something wrong. I'm the issue, when really the issue is that you are not being true to yourself. You're trying to fit the mold of whoever is not handling situations well. So if someone does something to you and they feel guilty about it and they ghost you for a couple days or whatever, they avoid it, right? I think that's a big one, is just avoiding it, pretending like it didn't happen, and then hoping you get over it. Then that's where you have to decide. Because I know for me, when that would happen, it would stew inside of me for days. I'd be like, I see them. They're avoiding. And it would just stew and stew and stew. And then finally I would just move on from it because it was just easier to move on and act like it didn't happen. But what would end up happening was those were compounding, right? Every time it would happen, I didn't forget about the last time. It just compounded on top and on top and on top. And when I realized that that's resentment and that's building resentment that I didn't want to have towards this person, I realized in that moment, this was a me issue, not a them issue. This was me saying, I don't have hardcore boundaries. Where do I need to put a boundary in place? Where do I need to speak up for myself? Because I know what I want. I naturally can be a very confrontational person. I actually don't mind confrontation. I don't seek it out by any means, but if there's an issue on the table, I would rather discuss it, get it out in the open, and then move on. Because if I don't do that, I know my brain naturally will build resentment. It will sit and stew and stew and stew. And our brains love to create stories that don't exist, right? So if we're thinking about something instead of addressing it, we are creating a story in our head about that, whether it's how the person's going to respond or what I'm going to say or what I'm going to think. We're creating these stories and then they become our reality. That's how we start making decisions, even though none of it's happened. And then the other person's like, where is this coming from? But it's coming from your resentment instead of addressing a situation immediately and moving on. So I think also understanding not everyone is that way. And sometimes people will say, I just need to take some time to think about this and then come back and have a discussion. But when you decide you're going to keep letting them avoid you and you're going to keep letting it stew, you're actually only hurting yourself. You're not benefiting the relationship, you're not benefiting you, and you're not benefiting them. So it comes back to, this is one of those things that it's your responsibility. You're the one being accountable. This is where you have to look in the mirror and say, this person might do this, but this is how I'm responding to it. And this works or it doesn't work. And that's a decision that you get to make along the way. But what I don't want to see people keep doing is allowing the avoidance to build resentment, because resentment, once you hit a level of resentment, it is really hard to get rid of. And I feel like that is where so many relationships break, whether it's in an office or a friendship or a relationship or with your children. There's so many different relationships we have that when we let resentment build, it gets to a point where there's no going back. And I think that that's very much, we can stop that in its tracks by just getting really clear and honest about what we want and the boundaries that we want. So some of the things that you can start to do, and this is kind of what I talked to her about, is deciding how you want to handle it. When you see this happening, what do you want to do? What serves you? Does it serve you to say, hey, this is what I've noticed you're doing. I feel like this is happening again. Can we have a conversation about this? Or maybe you need a day or two to address it, but you have to decide what works for you so that you don't have resentment towards that other person. You have to be, I always say, when you start to if someone's avoiding you or they feel guilty and you know that, and they're avoiding and they're not showing up for you, your emotions get so high. We want to bash, right? Like we want to attack. We want to make them feel the way they're making us feel. And that actually, I think, will hurt you in the long run versus figuring out how your brain works. I know for me, my brain works better if I say, hey, I really want to address this now, but let's just take a moment to let the emotions die down from it, because I'm pretty heightened about this. You're heightened in a different way. Let's take some time to let the emotions die and then have a very honest conversation. If it's something, there's another situation right now where I have encouraged someone who feels very avoided and very, very resentful. And there's a lot of really negative emotions stewing. And so, I've advised them, write it all out, get all the emotions out, but then you can put it together so that you get out everything you say that you want to say and how you truly feel, but in a respectful way that not only respects the other person, but more importantly, it respects you and your feelings. Because if we just lash out when we're upset or when we feel avoided from someone, you're going to say something that you either regret or you're not going to get out everything you truly feel. And then you're going to be more upset with that person because you left out something, because your emotions are so heightened. So I think figuring out what boundaries you want to put in place, what you actually want, how you want to handle the situation, how you feel about the situation, and then really checking in with your feelings, because we want to say this person made me feel blank, but it's actually the thought you had about what that person did that gave you that feeling. So that is worth writing out and saying, what is it about this that's really bothering me? And being able to address it with that person from that standpoint will actually allow them to open the door and probably be more open with you in the long run. But nonetheless, you will feel good about the decisions you're making because you're putting the boundaries in place. So I think this is a very big one in life. I think we all deal with this at some level with some relationship at some point. And maybe we're the person that does the avoiding, because when we feel guilty, we have a hard time saying, I'm sorry, or I messed up, or something like that. And so we become the avoiders. And it's the same situation. We get to say, I would say if you find yourself avoiding hard conversations and avoiding saying that I'm sorry, I would really look in the mirror and say, what is this about me saying I'm sorry that is so hard for me? And what is the end result of this relationship? If this relationship means that much to you, you're going to learn how to say I'm sorry. You're going to learn how to address it, but you have to get very, very clear on what your intentions of that relationship are and who you want to become along the way. So if you are this person, I love her so much and she broke my heart telling me her story, but I think now she has a lot of really good tools, and that's just it, is that we want everyone to be as mature as we are at every single level, and we're all raised so differently. I don't think I've met anyone who avoids emotions who also doesn't have a parent who avoids emotions, because I do believe that is a very taught thing. And I think that at any age, at any level, we can all unlearn that stuff and we can learn differently, but we have to want it and we have to understand the wants behind it and understand that being vulnerable is not a weakness. I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is people feel like if they're vulnerable, they're weak. And it's actually the complete opposite. The more vulnerable you are and the more open you are, the stronger you are. And the more people are going to be attracted to you just in general, because you're showing up as your authentic self. So hopefully this helped you if you are in this situation, or if not, just, you're going to encounter someone who does avoid at some point. And so now you have some tools to move forward. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being here and for choosing to be a little louder, a little braver, and a whole lot more you. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep tuning in to the fire inside. Stay unquiet.